Perfect. All right, so listen, if you know anything about Christianity or if you don't know anything about Christianity, you know that the symbol of Christianity is the cross. Big old T. Big old cross. So, we talk about this a lot because it is sort of our whole thing, right? Like without Jesus dying on the cross, there is no Christianity. Without the cross, there's virtually nothing. And so we are all aware that Jesus died on the cross. We all know the story. I don't need to explain it. Even if we don't know the story very well, you probably saw the Mel Gibson movie. And, I remember watching that movie. And like, look, it's not that I don't love the Lord, but like I was watching this movie and this woman next to me just wept the whole movie. And I was like, man, I can't even hear the screen, lady. It's okay. It was all in a different language, right? Do you remember that? I don't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's been a long time. The point is we know about the death of Jesus. The thing about it is I think sometimes there's little details in the story that we either miss or like we hear about it like at Christmas with a bunch, or not Christmas, Easter with a bunch of other details. And I think there's sometimes that we miss some details about this. And I think there's a detail that it's really, really important that we don't miss. There's a detail that I think is massively important in what we should understand about the cross that we don't often talk about. So this is a thing. This is part of the gospel according to Matthew. This is what we read in Matthew happened at the cross. Jesus actually on the cross. It's after the trial. It's after the torture, and he's literally on the cross. We read this. It says, the people passing by shouted abuse, shaking their heads in mockery. Look at you now, they yelled at him. You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well, if you are the Son of God, save yourself and come down from the cross. The leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the elders also mocked Jesus. He saved others, they scoffed, but he can't save himself. So he is the King of Israel, is he? Let him come down from the cross right now, and we will believe in him. He trusted God, so let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, I am the Son of God. Even the revolutionaries who were crucified with him ridiculed him in the same way. Here's what Matthew tells us. It's not just that Jesus died unjustly, even though he had committed no crimes, even though he had done no wrong. Jesus was killed unjustly, even though he had committed no crimes, even though he had broken no law. And as he was dying, people openly and defiantly mocked him. They made fun of him as they did it. It's not just that they killed him, it's that they sort of made a sport of it. And I think that's vitally, vitally important for us to see for at least a couple of reasons about the people themselves. Okay? So first of all, there is a level of cruelty that goes along with this story that I'm not sure we fully understand. You see, in our country, we have, for better or worse, we have capital punishment. We do. Sometimes we have, as a culture, decided that there are some people that we simply need removed. That there are people whose crimes are so bad that they are such a danger that even housing them in a locked box is not enough. We need them absolutely gone. The way I understand it, we're not even talking punitive. We're talking about helping everybody else too. But we have determined that there are some people for whom that happens. Maybe you hate that idea. Maybe you love that idea. We're not here to argue. We're just here to say it happens. Well, as it turns out, this exact situation that happens 2,000 years ago is impossible today. This thing they did to Jesus, serial rapists and pedophiles and serial killers and the worst of the worst, people who eat people, right? We give those people more respect than they gave to Jesus. As it turns out, you are allowed to watch someone be executed. If you're family, if you're connected in some way, you are allowed. But we have different laws in different states, but one thing that's across the board is they always have a barrier between the people watching and the person who's dying. They've got thick, soundproof glass. You can't just go up to somebody who is about to get lethal injection and start yelling, jokes at them and mocking them and making fun of. You're not allowed to do that. We have determined as a society that is a level of cruelty. Forget the person. We have decided that the people who are witnessing, that there should be more dignity than that. We have determined that when somebody dies in a capital crime, that there's more respect and solemnness that needs to happen, because we understand that whether this person deserves to die or not, that it is an absolute terrible tragedy that they have to. That all the things that led up to this moment are a tragedy. And so we don't laugh when somebody dies. We don't make fun of them. We grieve. Again, if not for the person, but we grieve for the situation that we're in. We're not awesome people, we modern American folk. I don't know that I need to justify that. But, we don't always take things seriously the way that we should. But in this case, we have drawn a hard line and said, look, you can't do that. If you got to kill somebody, this is a necessary evil. But it's still an evil because what led up to it is evil. Which is to say, the way they treated Jesus is worse than the way we treat people who eat people. I think that's important to note. There's something a little more mean-spirited going on with these people than we generally understand. And that leads to the second thing. Now, we're told the people passing by were making fun of Jesus. And that, of course, when we're understanding the way that we're talking, like it's everybody, right? We're not talking one group of people, but we specifically are told about the religious leaders. And it's the religious leaders of Israel who are at the core of this, right? When we can try to hammer this hard, it's not that the Jews killed Jesus, right? Because the Jews didn't even do it. The Romans did. All of humanity collectively kills Jesus, but the Jews start it. They're the ones who give the basis for it. And it's interesting because the reason for giving, the reason they give when they say we need to kill Jesus, the reasons they give are massively serious. So the first one they gave is they say that Jesus has committed blasphemy against God. He has disrespected the most devout rules they have, the most important core values they have. He has, they claim, disrespected the temple. He has disrespected the law. He has disrespected the prophets, that he is blaspheming against God. That is a capital crime in the Jewish religion, in the Jewish faith. It's so serious. And let me tell you, it is not a laughing matter. No one who believes that someone should die because they disrespect the temple or the law or the prophets or God thinks it's funny. In fact, if it was funny, you wouldn't need to execute him, right? Like, by definition, if the thing is funny, we don't say, well, let's kill him for it. If it's funny, it's funny. And if it's funny, you make a joke. But if it's this deathly serious thing, there's no jokes that are made. You don't joke about things that are serious. There's a list we all understand. We know, like, you don't joke about that stuff because it's not funny. Or there's some folks who do joke about it explicitly because it is, and they make a career off of that. But the truth is, we know there's things that aren't funny. And to the Jewish people, that was not funny. That's only half the reason, though. The other half of the reason, the Romans don't care about breaking Jewish rules, but they made the claim that Jesus was a dangerous revolutionary. He was an insurrectionist. He was leading a rebellion. They claimed that that's what he had done. They claimed that he was going to lead the Jewish people to follow him because he was saying that he was the king of the Jews and not the Caesar. And as the king of the Jews, not the Caesar, he was going to go to war against the Romans. They told Pilate when they said, look, if you don't kill this guy, you're not a friend of Caesar because this is Caesar's enemy. And let me tell you guys, I don't need to say it out loud, but I'm gonna. There's nothing funny about war. Nothing. There's nothing funny about soldiers losing their lives over land. There's nothing funny about civilians dying over a spat between leaders. There's nothing funny about widows and orphans. There's nothing funny about war at all. So the Jewish leaders are saying Jesus is guilty of this thing that's not funny, and he's guilty of this thing that's not funny. And then as he's being executed for it, they're making jokes. You know what that makes them? Liars. Liars. I mean, I probably don't need to tell you that they didn't really believe Jesus was going to try to overthrow Rome. There's nothing in 3 years of Jesus' ministry that would lead you to believe that he wanted to fight like anybody, much less an army in Rome. And I don't need to really tell you that every claim of him disrespecting the Jewish religion was a matter of interpretation, number one. And number two, it could be solved by a conversation. If they had ever sat down and listened to Jesus and said, hey, man, look, I just want to know, it sounds like you're disrespecting the temple. What do you mean? Jesus, every time that he may have done it in a parable because he's Jesus, somewhat infuriating. I don't know if you guys ever thought about that, like how frustrating it would be to try to get a straight answer out of Jesus. Like, hey, man, what do you want for lunch? And he starts telling a parable about a bird. Wait, so do you want bird? Because they've got 3 kinds of fish over here. And he tells a parable about the flowers. You're like, dude, just tell me what you want for. I get that Jesus can be frustrating to try to listen to about a straight answer, but nobody who talked to Jesus walked away saying, you know what that man does? Disrespects God. No one could do that. So when the religious leaders of Israel are mocking Jesus or telling jokes about Jesus, they're kind of giving away their motivations for killing Jesus. They're certainly telling us that it is not what they said it was. It is not about defending the integrity of Israel. It is not about protecting the good people of Israel from violence against Rome. It wasn't that. It's something a lot more personal. And it's something that Jesus had already told them. Just a few days before he's on the cross, Jesus is teaching at the temple. He has the entry on the donkey, the triumphal entry on the donkey, and everybody is watching, and everybody's excited. And Jesus goes to the temple, and he teaches, and he's teaching all these people in the temple during that last few days that he's alive, before he's alive again. But he's talking to these people, and these religious leaders come up to him, and they ask him a question. And Jesus, like I said, he often does, responds to their question by telling them a parable. And that parable tells us a lot of information. And that parable kind of goes like this. Jesus says, look, there was once a man who bought a large tract of land. And he's trying to figure out what he wanted to do with that land. And he settled in on he wanted to build a vineyard in that land. So he went about doing what you do with a vineyard. He of course gets the seed and the crops and everything. And he does all that. He plants it all, and he puts a big hedge around it. And he puts like a guard tower up, and he builds the trenches where water can come in, and he builds quite the operation. Because this is not for this landowner like something he's doing because he loves doing it. He's doing it because he wants to make money. He wants a return on his investment. He's putting out a lot of money here. He's putting a lot into this land. He's putting a lot into this. And so he wants to get something back from it. As it turns out, though, he has a lot of stuff going on, this businessman. And so he doesn't just work the land himself. He does what any CEO of a company or whatever does. He hires people. And so he handpicks and he chooses specific people that he thinks are absolutely perfect for the job. He finds these tenant farmers kind of from all over, and he brings them all together. And he says, look, this is what we're doing with the operation. This is what I need you guys to do. I need you to take care of all the stuff. And then I need you to, at the end of the harvest, I will send my servants to come and collect everything, and we'll split it up. You guys will get paid what I've agreed to pay you, and we'll get the crop, and we'll do that. Everybody makes money. Everybody happy, and we can do this year after year after year after year as long as everybody's cool. And so the year goes. And the farmers farm, and the landowner owns. And the harvest time comes along, and they do all the harvest. And just as he said he would, the landowner sent some of his servants to come collect the money and collect or collect the crop, so he could pay them and do everything else. Well, somewhere along the way, there's a disagreement of some kind, some sort of dispute. Things get really out of hand. We're not totally, the story doesn't tell us what happened, but there's a dispute of some kind, probably over money, maybe over pride. And there's a fight. And the farmers end up winning the fight, which is to say they end up killing some of the servants. They end up beating some of the other ones. Some of the servants escape, but they end up killing the servants, and they go back, and the servant goes back to the landowner, the surviving ones, and tell them what happened. And the landowner says, man, there's got to be something that I'm not seeing here. There's got to be like a lack of communication here. So he says, look, I'll send another group of servants. I don't know. That was the plan. Maybe, you guys settle down. They're a little, violent. So try to work it out with them. And he sends the group of servants back to the farmers. And the same thing happens. There's a disagreement and there's a problem. And they end up killing, most of the servants, and a couple of them escape. And that's what happens. So the landowner's sort of at a loss as to what to do now. He's got this crop he wants. He's got these farmers that seemed reasonable until like a week ago. And so he says, look, I'd go myself, but I've got some other things going on. I'm going to send my son. He owns everything I own. And so it's his land too. And it's his crop too. I'll send my son and surely they'll listen to him. It's just me, basically. And as the son was coming, on the road, the farmers realized who was coming this time. They were all ready to kill some more servants, apparently. But they said, hey, here's the son. And they talked among themselves, and they said, if we kill the son, then this can all be ours on our terms, the way we want it to be. He's the heir. Everything belongs to him. And if we kill him, his dad's never coming. This can just be ours. And so as soon as the son shows up, they kill him too. So that's the parable. That's the end of the story. And Jesus asks these religious leaders, he says, okay, pretend that was real. You tell me, if this was a real event, what do you think would happen in the epilogue? And the religious leaders, with just absolutely no self-awareness whatsoever, say, well, the landowner is eventually going to go kill all those farmers. And then because he wants to make money, he's going to hire new farmers, and they're going to get a chance to try again. And Jesus says, yeah, you guys are 100% right. That's exactly what would happen if this story was real. And then he informed them of the way in which the story was true and all the ways in which the people of Israel, particularly religious leaders, were doing exactly what was going on in the story. They had killed the prophets. They were going to kill the son. And importantly, they were all doing it not out of self-preservation, not out of, we're afraid of Rome or we're afraid of danger, not out of respect for God and the law, but out of selfishness. This was the question. I skipped over real fast. They asked him a question. He told a parable. This is the question that actually sparked this parable. This is what was asked to Jesus in his last week of being alive. Matthew chapter 21, you read this. It says, when Jesus returned to the temple and began teaching, the leading priests and elders came up to him. They demanded, by what authority are you doing all these things? Who gave you the right? Man, what a question. See, that question gives away everything. It tells us everything we need to know about the way Jesus died. Look, of course, I'm sure there were people, we read about it in the Gospel of John, there are people who are literally genuinely afraid of Rome, and they are afraid of what might happen. Okay. And there are people who are maybe clutching their pearls and are very afraid of other interpretations of the law. Okay. I don't know how they survived being Jewish, since there's always a billion interpretations of everything, but I'm sure there were some folks who were actually somewhat upset. Okay. But on the whole, for the people who were really the power brokers in Israel, they weren't mad at what Jesus was saying as much as they were mad that Jesus thought he could say it. It's not that they had an issue with his theology. It's that they didn't want him to talk at all. Because who gave you the right to talk? Who do you think you are? We are the important people of this nation. We are the important people of God's people. It's us. We're the ones who decide the truth. We're the ones who give the answers. Who are you to give answers? It was jealousy. It was farmers saying, why did these people profit off of this when we did the work? The religious leaders believed themselves to have done all the work and that God has no ability to come and tell them anything. Because why would we listen to anybody else? We're the center of this. It was selfishness. It was self-importance. It was delusion. It was grasping for power. It was the worst of humanity responding to God. And I think it's so important that we have this in our heads because, like I said, our symbol as Christians is the cross, that big T that we see everywhere. You see the cross everywhere, from jewelry to, outside of buildings to tattoos to, the cross is just everywhere. And usually as Christians, when we think about the cross, we think about things that are very impractical. A couple things we think about. The first and most important thing is we think about when we die, we go to heaven, right? Like, let's be clear, that's what we did. Like, Billy Graham probably did this to us, right? Like every message Billy Graham ever did was just about going to heaven. And so we thought, oh, well, that must be what we're supposed to be saying. He's popular and big, so cool. Let's do what he does. And look, Jesus dies on the cross. Yes, when we die, we go to heaven because of the cross. Of course. Here's the problem with thinking about it that way, though. Y'all are not dead yet. Also, I don't think anybody in this room wants to be dead soon. So if we talk about the cross as the thing that gets us to heaven when we die, I know that's true. We just sang it in a song. Jesus paid it all. Or we just sang that song, right? Of course, that's true. But it's not practical. It doesn't help me today because I have no intentions of dying today. I suppose I might. But that means it's a bad day, right? Like, that does not go according to plan for me. I got big plans for today. You know what I'm doing this afternoon? I'm taking a nap. I got big plans, I'm going to take one of those naps that, like, by the end of that nap, I'm going to wake up and not know what year it is. Like, my dog is going to have to wake me up from the nap to be like, dude, I got to pee. And I'll be like, all right, fine, I'll get you up. Like, it's glorious. We are not planning on dying. And so if the cross is just about when we die, that doesn't help us today at all. The other way we talk about the cross is we like to argue about what we call atonement theories. Oh, man, this is a big thing in the church. People with, like, a bunch of different degrees argue about what thousands of people for thousands of years have argued about. And it's super fun. Anytime an argument goes on for 2,000 years, here's what you need to know. There's not an answer, or else we would have solved it 2,000 years ago. I feel like the people that are like the theologian people like me, the preachers, the teachers, nobody wants to say that out loud. I'm not very smart. I'll say it out loud. When we argue about something for 2,000 years, there's a reason, and it's not because there's an answer that I just discovered. And so we turn it into an argument. So it's either an argument over whatever, which can be interesting. I love arguing about whatever. It can be interesting, or we talk about and we die. Either way, this is sort of one of those ultimate so what things. This is our 4th week of our series called So What. We're talking about we believe things, but then we live a life and those things don't really connect. right? Like the things that like I agree that Jesus died on the cross, and cool, when I die that'll kick in, but we're supposed to have a connection between these things, between the way that we live every day and the things that we believe. And so the question is this: in what sense does the cross help my Tuesday afternoon or Thursday evening? In what sense does the cross impact and change my perception in the day to day? And the answer to that, I think, is a really obvious one that we don't like talking about. Because, see, what we do, no matter what it is with the cross, we're always talking about God. Always. It's always, well, God willed this, or God planned this, or Jesus is a sacrifice somehow, or, the ransom metaphor we, talked about during communion, like that's Jesus. We just talked about during communion. It's all Jesus. So we focus on the cross as being an act of God, right? Like we talk about it that way. But I got to tell you, the very first gospel sermon preached by the Apostle Peter landed with, y'all killed Jesus. Like he didn't, like you guys killed Jesus. The Bible depicts this in a rich way, that we, humanity, killed Jesus. And when we look at it like that, there is an undeniable conclusion we have to come to. And that conclusion is this: people are terrible. Like, people are awful. People are words that I am not supposed to say in a sermon. Like, people are, and it's funny. I will admit, it's just a very personal thing. Like, I grew up, in a very loving house. I grew up, obviously struggles with various things. I mean, I look like this. There's no way school was easy. But like, for the most part, I went to church, and like church was great. And like I met religious people, and they were all great. And like people talk about like they're religious. I didn't have any of that. And so being an adult has been one incident after another of being like, wait, people are what? People do what? That guy said what? She's lying about that? And I got to tell you, it took me a while to get that thick skin of like the world is just horrible. Like I don't remember growing up and having anybody lie to my face. And I'm an adult and people just looking me in the eye lying to me. And I'm like, who are you and why are you doing this? This isn't how people are supposed to act. What is going on? And then one day, I woke up and I realized that, like, wait, I do that same stuff too. And I realized that what the cross is meant to teach us is how terrible we are. I know, like, we got a cross back there. I get, like, the cross is cool, but I guess we got one there too. We got two. I forgot we had a cross in here. That's how ubiquitous the cross is. Is I forgot how many in this room that I am sitting in there are. And we look at it and we look past it. The message of the cross is, my goodness, what are people capable of? Jesus committed no sins. Jesus hurt no one. Jesus broke no laws. Even if he is not God, Jesus was an incredible human being who did nothing to anyone. And he was killed out of petty jealousy, pride, and elitism. Now factor in the fact that he is literally God in the flesh, here to communicate to us the ways in which God is love and light and life. And it's all wonderful news. His birth is heralded by the angels as good news for everybody. And we still killed the man. And you can see how terrible this is. But see, it's not just about that either. It is about that recognizing that people are terrible and I'm people. And I'm not here trying to make anybody feel bad. I'm just telling the truth. One of the fantastic things about that first passage we read of Matthew is that it literally just says like all the people who went by were doing this. That covers men and women. It covers young and old. It covers Jews and Gentiles. It covers devout people and people who believed in nothing remotely like what Jesus wanted to teach. It even the people on the cross he was dying next to, doing it too. And what that means is that if it was them, then it would be us. I know for a fact I would have killed Jesus if I were there. I equally know I would have made horrible jokes about Jesus as he was dying if I were there. I know that. And I know that because yesterday I put all the chairs in here. YMCA's being here. They clear all the chairs, and yesterday I put all the chairs up. And I was doing it, and I was looking, and I was like, man, I'm killing it. I'm killing it. These are great. These chairs are awesome. And then I stood up on the stage, and I noticed how wonky this row is. This row is like a snake. It's like a river that is moving. And this morning I'm talking to Jamie, and Jamie's like, yeah, those are bad too. Thanks, Jamie. That's cool. Appreciate that. Let's not talk about these at all, because that's what I got right now. Now, be honest. How many of y'all noticed how wonky the chairs were? Mike immediately walked in. He's like, these are terrible. Can't do that. Eli, you've got two dudes. Like, I had a couple jokes going through my head. I'm not going to say them. Anyway, that's it, right? Like, that's it. I thought I was doing a good thing. You see, that's the problem with humanity. We live in a world, okay, that tells us that you just need to follow your heart. You just need to listen to that voice that's inside. You need to let your conscience be your guide. Like, just the answers you're looking for are within. And look, I understand we're going to talk about the Holy Spirit in a couple of weeks. I understand as Christians there's a level to which we can listen to God within us. And yeah, but look, our consciences are dumb. Have you read any history book? People's consciences can put up with a lot of atrocity. War, abuse, slavery. Just like, you guys realize, like, I'm not getting political here. Every culture in human history until like 100 years ago, 150 years ago, had slaves. You want to listen to your conscience? Understand that every one of our forefathers' consciences were cool with owning people. Like, I don't know, that seems bad. Maybe don't listen to that thing. Like, our hearts and our feelings lie to us constantly. It's the dumbest illustration, but boy, does it prove the point. If y'all ever dated anybody that you're not with now, remember how you felt back then? You just felt like they were just the bee's knees. And you look at them now and you want to throw up in your mouth. Right? Some of y'all married that dude. Right? Like, you want to listen to your feelings? That's where it gets you, throwing up in your mouth, thinking about your history. We're not built to make these sorts of decisions. We're built to live in communion with a God who helps us to make these kinds of decisions. And when we divorce ourselves from that help from God, we make just the worst possible decisions. That's the so what of the cross. We need to understand that we shouldn't trust people. And if you think that sounds pessimistic, man, I just don't know who you've been talking to. But that also includes not trusting our own selves. We make horrible decisions too. And that's why when Jesus was in the temple, when Jesus was there that last week, He's preaching, he's teaching, he's telling this parable, but he also says this. This is our last verse for the day. This is what we read in the gospel according to John. Jesus, a couple days before the cross, teaches this. He says, Jesus shouted to the crowds, if you trust me, you are trusting not only me, but also God who sent me. For when you see me, you are seeing the one who sent me. I have come as a light to shine in this dark world, so that all who put their trust in me will no longer remain in the dark. Jesus said the world was dark. And when we are separate from him, I don't mean like on an existential spiritual level, I just mean in our decision making. When we make decisions apart from Christ, we are making decisions in the darkness. Which is why Jesus invites us to trust him, to follow him, to include him, to listen to him. Because the fact of the matter is we think the darkness is light. We've mistaken it. We think that like, well, this darkness is like, we think it's good. It's kind of like eating a British dessert. You ever eaten British cookies? They think those are good because they've never had ours. We live in a world filled with darkness, but we're so used to it. We're so used to it that we don't understand there's something so much better out here. So Christ invites these people, and by the way, none of them listen now. Like, he's going to get arrested, he's going to go to the trial, he's going to get crucified. Like, yeah, nobody listens now. But the invitation doesn't end with his death, of course. And so you and I are called to be people who rightly understand the darkness of the world, that people can't be trusted, that we are people. And if we ever need reminding, just remember the cross. People killed Jesus out of pettiness, and they did so while laughing. And it wasn't one group of people, it was collectively representatives of all of humanity. We need Jesus desperately. And the cross doesn't just teach us that Jesus is there for us. The cross teaches us why we need him in the first place. This morning, we're in our fourth week of our series called So What? And in our day-to-day lives, the so what of the cross is understanding who we are and then understanding our desperate need to respond to Christ's invitation to trust in his light over our darkness. Our fourth lesson is this. Humanity is dark and we do terrible things. We find light not in people or in this world, but in Christ. Humanity is dark and we do terrible things, and we find light not in people or in this world, but in Christ. We're going to sing a song, offer an invitation. Bible teaches us to repent and be baptized. If you don't know what that's all about, let's talk. If you're an immersed believer in Christ looking for a perfect church home, this place is not it. But we do serve a perfect God. We want to connect, cultivate, want to meet new people, want to share the gospel, want to grow up when we do it. And we want to be people who trust in the light of Christ. In a dark world, understanding we don't do this on our own. We can't do this on our own. We always need Jesus. As we stand,